Okay, now we're gonna focus on the role of retailers. I welcome on the stage Helen Dickinson, CEO for British Retail Consortium, Francesca Lilley, Head of Sustainability at COS, and Patrik Söderström, CEO for GANT. Welcome. There is a revolution happening in the retail. The shift from high street to online, the impacts of globalisation, and the generation focused on making sure that waste doesn't exist. Francesca Lilley, what would you say is the key factors to a more sustainable retail industry?
I think the important thing is to examine the full value chain, and that for us means looking at more responsible production, our operations, whether it's the packaging we're transporting products and collections in, our stores, the environments that we're building, but also then making sure that we're being transparent and honest and educating our community, whether that's our consumers or the citizens that we were talking about, but also providing and facilitating more responsible purchasing practices and that use phase that we need to enable them to be more conscious of.
What do you mean educating?
I think we've talked a lot already about how much consumers, citizens understand what circularity is, whether they see value in an object after they've fallen out of love with it, or maybe once it's been damaged. And I think helping them to understand how they can also, first of all, make a more sustainable choice in the first instance by buying from brands that have produced a more sustainable or responsible product, but also the part that they have to play, taking care of a garment so that it will extend its lifespan, repairing it, maybe making minor changes or repairs when it degrades, but also then what they do when they've no longer got use for that product. And there are a lot of different choices that they can make. So helping them to understand that impact and also being transparent with the way that we are running our businesses so they can make informed decisions.
Does this goes for GANT too, Patrik?
Pretty much exactly the same thing. I mean, we're trying to look at the full value chain and try to focus obviously on all parts of it. But there are some areas obviously particularly coming from material and production and partly actually the consumer, the end user, was quite a big portion of the emissions coming from, and that's where obviously where the circularity comes into play. I think we're pretty much exactly on the same place when it comes to that.
Helen, what would you say are the barriers for a more sustainable industry?
I guess it's probably worth sort of stepping back, setting the scene in terms of the impact of carbon within, I mean, I'm looking at it from a UK retail point of view. So that's 200 million tons of carbon equivalent.
That's some.
That is from a household's point of view, so not the countries, but from a household's point of view, the products that we are buying of all sorts, from clothing to Electroluxes, is about a third of our emissions. So the challenge as well as the opportunity in order to make a real difference is really there. The biggest, I think, well, there are, we've only got half an hour. I mean, the barrier, the list is long, but I think more and more people are getting with the program, for want of a better description. But the chief barriers are, government has a role, so there needs to be, so take something like, I don't know, electric charging infrastructure for logistics. So the infrastructure that sits around the ability for everybody to use electric vehicles, we need to have that in place. That isn't something that individual companies can do. That requires governments to take action. So one of the areas is about government. The other was touched on in the previous panel around collaboration. So more businesses need to be working with each other so that they can find solutions together. And that's the sort of thing that we're trying to provide with our members, because we've got about 80 companies who've signed up to our Climate Action Roadmap, which is all about driving that momentum through learning and peer understanding. And then, again, as was touched on the previous panel, how to influence the behavior of customers I think is a really important aspect. And there's a real role for retail to help educate people to make better choices, because at the moment, certainly most people are very confused about what would make the most difference. And within a cost of living crisis, headlines every day, their individual purchasing decisions are still very driven by price. So it has to be the retailers that help them make those better choices.
Mm. We often read about surveys that people rank sustainability higher than price. Would you say that this is a true fact in reality, Patrik?
Well, definitely consumers are changing attitudes towards what they actually buy, how they buy it, and how much they're actually prepared to pay for it. And clearly, we can see that already. We see consumers turning their backs on companies not living up to expectations. Then, as Helen was saying, it's quite hard for consumers today to understand the difference in between kind of the same product, what is sustainable or what is more sustainable. But consumers, and more consumers, fortunately, not enough with consumers, but more consumers actually do understand, and they take conscious decisions, and they are prepared to pay for it if needed.
And the consumers, are they pushing the development, or is it you as a company?
I don't think the consumers are pushing enough. They do to some extent, but I would be more than happy, and I think we all would be more than happy if consumers were pushing even more.
How would they do that?
Sorry,
How would they do that? What would you like them to say
again,
to you?
it's about, it's our role as well. We need to help consumers take better decisions. We need to help them to actually put more pressure on us as companies, as retailers, as brand, because the more pressure we get, the better we become eventually. And we still, we've come far, but we still have such a long way to go before we're as good as we should be.
But how is that made in real life? How do you help your customer to make a better decision?
Well, in our case, we have a circularity initiatives. We call it the 7 Rs. I won't go into all the details, but we're trying to help consumers to actually understand.
Just 1 R.
1 R, okay. So take rent.
Okay.
So we just introduced rent in our stores, but we also do the second-hand part. We take products back, and if the products are in a decent condition, we resell it. And if it's not in a good condition, we actually circulate it in a better way than consumers would probably do. And if you want me to talk about the next 5, we can do that afterwards.
It's okay. We got a lot of questions here from the audience. Winner of the pitching competition said items only worn 7 times. That's great for your bottom line, but environmentally is unsustainable. How to square this? Francesca?
I can take that one. We've all started to wake up as consumers to the impact of our kind of behaviors when it comes to wearing clothes. We feel proud at COS that we have a product that has the capacity to be worn many more times than that. And I think we start with educating the customer and helping them understand the quality that we have offered, and then also helping them to understand how to better care for that product to extend its lifespan. But also we can see a growing industry, it's not new, but it has really taken off in the last few years, of kind of peer-to-peer second-hand selling, where maybe a garment has been worn that 7 times and that customer has maybe lost love for it, but it has a long, long life ahead of it. And I think for us, we're really trying to facilitate that a platform. We have a resale platform ourselves where we are really getting an engaged and loyal customer and helping them find their friend to pass on a product that maybe they want to sell to somebody else, and support them in actually retaining some of that value for themselves in that investment. So I think it is, again, going back to what we've said before, educating the customer about the impact of their behaviors. We have a large responsibility as retailers to do that, to help them understand, and then again providing those services that facilitate them to do that. So it's a collaboration, I would say, in that sense.
To me, it's sustainable fashion. It sounds a bit like a contradiction, because fashion is something that is something ongoing, something that changed all the time. Is that possible?
I think the word sustainable, responsible, we're talking about how can we operate a business in a responsible way, and that demand for newness, whether we call that wardrobe renewal, something that is functional that you need to replace. We see that demand will be there, but I think the concept of ownership and how customers relate to their wardrobe, what it means to them, how long they're keeping things for, and what they're doing at the end of that relationship that they have with the product is shifting. And then I think fashion as a concept is also evolving and shifting, and where you're interacting with newness, whether that's a new product made from a recycled input rather than a virgin resource, whether that is a product that you have bought from somebody else or a product that you have extended the life of. So I think our concept of what fashion means and what is new to us is also shifting.
How goes the discussion on British retail consortium? About this? How goes the discussion about this?
I think again, if you look at it from the top down, I think what you're sort of redefining what retail means, because one of the questions in there is about selling products, because surely it's going to be bad for the bottom line if you're selling less.
Yeah.
And I think there's a sort of base assumption that when we're talking about retail, we're just talking about the selling of products, and it's all about just selling more and more and more. And I think what we're talking about here is like redefining what retailing is, to be a much broader thing than just volume, but to be that reusing, to build that circularity that the whole thrust of the previous panel was all about, into the way that the materials that are used in the production process, the amount of waste that a production process gives rise to, the transportation, logistics, the supply chain that gets a product from A to B, the physical spaces, whether that's warehouses or stores that they operate in, how those are actually operated, and then what customers then do with products at the end of during their life and at the end of their life. So really thinking much more broadly about what the definition of the industry itself is, and I think the question there about is this a competitive space or not, I think is a really interesting one, because lots of businesses are trying to gain a competitive advantage by showcasing the thing that is unique about what they're doing, but actually when you're talking about the need for recycling at scale of clothing in the UK, for example, there isn't that infrastructure in the same way as Mr. Tyre Man was explaining there isn't that infrastructure for tyres. We don't have it for clothing and for textiles, so that's not competitive space. That's where the collaboration needs to come. So I think what we are seeing is more and more people prepared to come together to really drive that change.
And to add to that, I mean, reverse supply chain logistics that you're referring to is still it's a very linear model, and we really need collaboration cross-industry, cross different competencies to be able to facilitate that more circular way of running business.
So what do you need to make that happen?
I mean, fundamentally, the retail industry is built that you produce a product, you send it somewhere, and then it's bought. But actually, we want to, and we've been exploring many circular business models. I know both of us in our businesses, to be able to take a product back, to repair it, to bring it to another customer, to be able to recycle it, of course, repurpose it into a new product, and to do that at scale, to do that, we're a global organisation, many retailers are, and without incurring additional emissions by shipping things all over the world, this is an emerging area. There are many suppliers. We're fortunate to have suppliers that have a lot of this expertise, but they might not have all of the expertise in one place. So I think it's something that, we really need to collaborate to achieve.
But you do that at cost.
We have trialled a number of different, we've got very skilled suppliers that we partner with that are allowing us to repurpose materials. We've done this with pre-consumer waste and post-consumer. To do that at scale is a challenge that we need to explore. And we are trialling a number of different other circular business models where we are taking back products that customers have loved for a long time and finding ways to in many cases, we don't need to recycle. They're ready to be just cleaned and small repairs made, and they can be sold again. So we're trying to facilitate that, but on a global scale, and to do that to all of our customers, wherever they might be, is a big challenge for the industry to solve.
So, Patrik, how far away are we from a circular system?
Actually, we're quite far away still, to be honest. We're getting better, but we still have a long way to go until we can say that we've done our very best together. But I think the key thing for people like us sitting here is that, I mean, none of us can do it on our own. I mean, what we're trying to do is connect. We're trying to share knowledge, share numbers, share skills, etc., to make sure that we actually get better together. Because we're not trying to win with sustainability in our companies. We're trying to make good-looking products that everyone would like to wear when they come to a summit or to a nice gala dinner in the evening. But sustainability, that's something that we all need to make sure that we drive together as fast as possible.
I think there's an Ellen MacArthur Foundation statistic about, I think the proportion of goods that are in a circular economy is less. I think it's about 8-point-something%. So they're just reinforcing what Patrik's saying. You know, the road ahead is very, very long. But I think, and a lot of the answers don't exist at the moment to some of the questions. But you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to start now, because I think, you know, back to this sort of tension between, is it a business-driven thing or a customer-driven thing? Actually, from a business point of view, any business that isn't really working out how they become more sustainable, you know, might well be successful in the short term, but they are not going to be, you know, here in 10 or 20 years' time, because they won't have the business model to be able to survive.
And I think to add to that, many of the circular business models that we are talking about, we are trying to create the demand that we believe will be there. It's not there at scale yet, but by providing those platforms, by educating the customer, we hope that we are creating a larger demand. So these might not be solely profit-driving exercises in the first instance, but we really believe that we can be more sustainable organizations in the future by creating that demand and that engagement from the customer.
Yeah. We have a lot of questions here. I picked the top one. Wouldn't it be cheaper for large corporations and brands to collaborate with the startups like Hack Your Closet rather than building second-hand platforms themselves?
We have actually collaborated with a startup called Reflaunt. We'd be happy to meet you as well, Hack Your Closet later on. Because absolutely, and I think we've talked a lot about the importance of collaboration and needing to be agile. And you know, especially when we're established organizations, we can't always wait for the perfect internal solution. So absolutely, I mean, fully agree with that.
And we are actually in discussions with Hack the Closet.
Oh, really?
Good advert.
We haven't
You met outside here?
We haven't reached the finish line yet, but we're discussing it.
Uh-huh. What's the missing part?
I mean, there's so many different parts. It would take me probably 2 hours to actually discuss it in here. But I think the key thing, again, I mean, we're learning a lot from startups and from other companies. And we're so happy to be sharing knowledge, because there's quite a lot of good ideas coming from all the startups. And it's just making the system work, making the flow work in a way that it's actually as good as we want it to be and as good as they would like it to be.
So how do you, if there is a company here with a good idea, how would they approach you? Francesca or Patrik?
We're not allowed to put business cards anymore, I heard. So
No.
I'll give anyone my phone number to give me and Jessica a call to have a look at it, for sure. We're open for anything. We're open for all discussions, because again, that's what this is all about. We do not know everything.
No.
We need input from each and every one, different industries, different companies. We need to learn from each other.
Yeah. But we got some questions here, people who want to know what you know. What does the panel see as the role of technology and the tech sector more broadly in helping the retail sector to become more sustainable?
I mean,
Go on.
That's a bit, yeah.
we have a huge amount of transparency and traceability that is only achievable with tech, especially through the supply chain, but also understanding consumer behavior. And like we said, creating that demand and helping to create stronger conversations with the consumer. So it's crucial.
What would be the ideal relationship between companies such as Vinted from a retail brand perspective?
Probably a question for one of the brands.
I must admit, I'm not sure Vinted. Can someone
Vinted
update?
are a second-hand peer-to-peer platform.
Yeah.
I think, maybe you have experience on this, but we don't see, there's a lot of platforms out there, and we initially created our platform because we knew we had a very highly engaged customer looking for a product that they loved, that they knew would be of high quality. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to collaborate with external players, and we are certainly not, we haven't closed any doors when it comes to partnerships.
And there's no perfect business model yet when it comes to this. I think we need to work it together to make sure that we find a business model that we can actually explore and scale eventually as well.
And how do you work with your suppliers?
Well, first and foremost, what we try to do is to make sure that we work long term with all suppliers, and we're trying to find obviously suppliers that are as keen as we are to move in this area, and the best way of doing that is obviously incentivizing them. But it's not a big problem for us today because they are as interested as we are to make sure that we move within this area. We obviously have a supplier excellence process to make sure that we vet everyone in the best possible way we can do, but they are as interested as we are, and when we're trying to develop this area together rather than, just negotiating things back and forth.
For most, for the industry, it's 80 to 90% of the impact is down the supply chain in that scope 3 emissions. So influencing, working with suppliers is a complete underpin to be able to shift the dial for any retail business, and that's particularly the case in food, where it's, I think, closer to 90. In clothing and fashion, it's probably, on average, about 80% of those emissions. So those relationships are absolutely vital. But there is, again, there's a sort of, a meeting of the objectives, as Patrik is saying, because, a retailer's scope 3 is the outside of the operations scope 3 of the person that's supplying them. So if you can make change together, then that will overall be beneficial to both companies.
We have a lot of our larger suppliers who we've been with since day one, and we have really close relationships with, and we believe that improvements that we can encourage them to make or set very ambitious targets again also makes them a more attractive supplier to other brands, so it's part of driving their business.
Would a shortcut to this problem be to sell less clothes?
Well, all in all, if you look at the total market, we could probably produce less clothes, but we could definitely make better clothes that last longer, with good quality, timeless pieces, etc. If that means that we sell less products, I think everyone would be actually quite fine with that.
Yeah. And it comes back to the reuse and circularity. So slam dunk, that's yes, I reckon.
Yeah. What would your owners say, Patrik?
Well, they're going to make money from the services that sit around it, right? So it's a different definition of what
we talk
retail
about different
is.
KPIs. We talk about increased transactions per product. We talk about generating revenue from other services in addition. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth in different revenue streams in the future.
As well, and then for good and for bad, there might not be all the companies in the world wanting to do the same things as we want to do, and hopefully that could be an upside as well then.
If we can sell more products to more sustainable products to more customers, and maybe not all of the retailers will survive that transition.
True.
We need those startups keep coming.
Yes.
With better ideas.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And over to you, Nick.